people. As a community, it's tearing them apart. They may say this is helping, it's tearing them apart. I'm not for this, I don't care, my one will not go to school, but it's tearing them apart.
I wouldn't care if they were green or purple. It's the idea of putting my kid on a bus when I have a school right across the street from where they should go. I don't care what color they are.
They'll change this law.
It's like supposed to be a free country.
It's getting in the country now that they're telling you to do this and do this now, and you won't even have no freedom.
All I want is a seat in their school. Hey, nothing else. Let us go to our neighborhoods where our kids are safe. We want our kids safe. We want our children safe. And we never want them safe. If I told you to eat shit, you wouldn't eat it. Niggas suck.
They were throwing eggs at the window and trying to hit people with them.
And there was while we was in school, there was throwing glass at black people and little kids.
What school was this again?
The Roger class.
Are you going back to school tomorrow?
No way.
Ordering you to disperse in the name of the Commonwealth. If you're not going to disperse, you're going to be arrested.
I think it's going to be all right if everybody comes and stop being scared, because, shoot, I don't think there's nothing to be scared of.
But it just got used to Southie High, and it's hard to adjust when I was school.
How do you think things are going to work out here at Roxbury High?
I guess it'll work out all right. If the parents just stay out of it all and let the kids work it out for themselves, it'll be all right.
Welcome once again to The Radical Imagination. I'm your host, Jim Vrettos. I'm a sociologist who's taught at John Jay College of Criminal Justice and Yeshiva University here in New York City. Busing was a term used during the 1970s and 80s to describe court-ordered school desegregation in our public schools. As a tool of desegregation, it largely worked in its time, particularly in the South. It was white racism and resistance, often violent, that made it difficult to accept and succeed. When busing served as a tool of segregation, it was treasured. It became reviled only when it was transformed into a tool of integration. Millions of American kids still ride school buses today, rarely for purposes of integration. America's racial dilemma from its beginning has been about saying one thing and doing another. Our Constitution, Bill of Rights, and Declaration of Independence radically stated that people are created equal and have basic and inalienable rights. At the same time, it treated Black people as an inferior race and denied them numerous civil, political, and human rights. The so-called Negro problem was in fact a white problem. It originated in the white soul of America. And white America continually and routinely lied to itself, creating myths, rationalizations, and an economic, political, and moral system to support those lies. Blaming the victim and scapegoating, creating the myth of the American dream melting pot, stereotyping, wars on drugs and crime, voter suppression, lynching, slavery, mass incarceration, Jim Crow laws, maintaining segregated public facilities, demeaning, humiliating, disrespecting, and shaming Black bodies and souls through a vicious system of control and terror, all became part of a system to maintain white power and privilege. Those who suffered the most, ironically, became the vehicles through which America could be redeemed. Reconstruction after the Civil War, the civil rights movement of the 50s, 60s, and 70s, the moral and political activism of Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, the Black Panthers, and more recently, Black Lives Matter and Reverend Barber's Poor People's Campaign were opportunities to heal and radically transform the country. These movements challenged strains of American white culture rooted in white liberal hypocrisy and white authoritarianism and nationalism, exemplified most recently and vividly in the Trump administration. The landmark 1954 Brown versus Board of Education Supreme Court case established that racial segregation in public schools was unconstitutional, even if the segregated schools were otherwise equal in quality. Separate but equal educational facilities for racial minorities was inherently unequal, a violation of the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. Over 65 years after the Supreme Court struck down segregation in Brown versus Board, Black children are as segregated from white students as they were in the mid-1970s. America is still largely a nation of two societies, one Black, one white, separate and unequal. Denver became one of those cities embroiled in the busing struggles of the 70s and 80s. As a graduate of East Denver High School in 1964, I wanted to do a show on the subject, lessons to be gleaned, and the state of race relations and equality in our country today. I'm thrilled to welcome to the Radical Imagination today two of my fellow 1964 graduate East High Angel comrades, Joel Allen and Buddy Noel. Both were extremely active at East. Joel was business manager for the Angels yearbook staff in pre-law, pre-med, and numerous other clubs. He's a graduate of the University of Nebraska College of Medicine. His practice is in internal medicine, pediatrics, obstetrics, and gynecology. Buddy was all-city student council, a member of the football, basketball, baseball, and golf teams, president of the delegate assembly, pre-law, and sophomore class president. He received a BA and an MBA from Dartmouth College and earned his law degree from Harvard University. He practices law in Denver at the office he founded, the Noel office. Buddy's father, Edmond, was one of the state's first Black surgeons. His mother, Rachel, was an educator and scholar who became the first African-American elected to the Denver Public School Board, and later in 1976, the first African-American voted onto the University of Colorado Board of Regents. She led the efforts to integrate Denver's public schools with the Noel Resolution passed in 1970. So, Joel and Buddy, thank you so much. It's a reunion, finally. What are we now, 57 years after? Perhaps you can start us off by also giving us a little bit of a background to those busing issues in Denver.
Well, first of all, I don't know what Joel would have said he found to be different from your introduction, so let's pass on that.
Okay.
I thought certainly you gave a generalized view of a progress of race relations from, perhaps you didn't say 1619, but certainly from slavery, and how we have evolved from that beginning point. Obviously, everything has to start from that beginning point. Your history was certainly relatively correct. It might have mixed solutions with causes, but that's part of how we discuss these issues. The book supposedly starts with 1967, so our own lived experiences at East predate the book.
Yes.
And that's an important part of the story. So, we had a different experience at East in 1962 to 1964 for our years there than, for example, my sister had, who finished in 1968.
I'm so glad you're making that point, Buddy. I think it's really important. Again, we graduated in 1964. We weren't being bused and so on. I felt extremely blessed and lucky to be at East. I found I had a terrific education, and it helped me and prepared me for my later work. But again, the background behind the busing that then took place in the late 60s Um, why did that happen? Your mother was in the forefront of this struggle.
Sure. Well, let's start by defining problem and solution. Busing is not a problem. Busing is a solution. If a solution is inadequate, a solution is poorly performed or executed, the problem is what we should be talking about. The problem that your history attempted to be relating is racism stemming by slavery, stemming from slavery, being perpetuated by all the after effects of slavery is the problem. And so someone who would complain about busing, I'd say, well, then what is your solution? Because the problem of racism, discrimination, violations of equal protection rights under the Constitution, that's still the problem. That was a problem in 1964 when we were at East, even though our experience was an optimistic, improving one from a terrible beforehand. But after our experience at East, Denver changed, the country changed, and we find ourselves where we are today with the same problem.
And both you and I, and perhaps we're getting Joel back here real soon, but Buddy, both you and I headed back east. I'm a New York City kid. So I came out to Denver when I was about 8 or 9 years old, and then I returned for graduate work. So, and you were at Dartmouth and then Harvard. So you left, 1964 as well. I left back to New York. You went to Hanover, correct?
Yes, right.
And so what was your experience there compared to Denver? And obviously,
well, I'm not sure the last time you were in Hanover, but it would be a microcosm of Park Hill, not a microcosm of another city like New York. Hanover's a very, very small town. The atypical college town might be Manhattan, but the typical college town is Hanover. It is, I don't know, maybe it had 3,000 people in the town when I was there. Right. But the college experience I had at Dartmouth and graduate school at the Tuck School, the business school, was that of a small college experience where people knew each other. You're just as likely to see your math professor in the grocery store as the classroom. So it was I'd say a microcosm of East High School. East High was 690 when we were there. I had a class of 800 people. It was just a small college experience that I came to truly love and value for just that opportunity to have a small college experience. I went to Harvard, which is a large university, and got the opposite experience. And I guess I'm better for it, having experienced both. But one of the things that was the same in a very large way was there was a small percentage of minority students at East when I was there, and an even smaller number of people of color at Dartmouth when I started in 1964. The faculty at Dartmouth had approved a plan to try to desegregate the college shortly after the Brown decision in '54. And with all deliberate speed, they got around to the first intentional execution of that plan. In my class, that started in the fall of 1964 with 14 Black students. The college had been accepting Black students since the mid 1800s, but only in small numbers of one or two a class. And my class was the first class with a, quote, large number of Black students at 14.
Absolutely. Buddy, you're raising some very, very important points. Busing is a tool. It's a vehicle, one of the many vehicles that we've used to try to bring about a more racially just, integrated society. It, in fact, was successful in many ways, particularly in the South. I think it was 1964, 2% of the Southern Black students were integrated in white schools. By 1972, it was close to half. So that brief period of time, America took it seriously, or seriously enough to make some sort of dent. I think the important point is it's just a vehicle, it's a tool. How do we build that sense of community that you talked about in Hanover, in Park Hill, and all over the country, that really transcends race and culture and religion, and brings us to the promise of America. Again,
I'm not sure it transcends race or culture. It requires us to evolve our racial beliefs and our cultural experience to what we say we want it to be. President Obama often talked about a nation improving itself. Well, this is what we are about. Perhaps we have stops and starts. Perhaps our grade for our effort in certain periods of time is D or D minus, but at other times the hope is pretty optimistically based, and we make greater strides. The difference to me, again, is addressing problems. If solutions don't work, come up with a better solution rather than feeling an excuse is given for a solution that didn't work, and therefore the problem doesn't have to be solved. The problem still has to be solved.
Absolutely.
And busing was an easy and attractive solution to choose because we already had the buses. We knew how to bus. We knew how to bus for any other purpose, whether it was athletics or field trips or students that live far from school. We had the opportunity to set up a plan that might have succeeded more than it did. You know, we were pretty adept during the Vietnam War at the logistics of getting beer and cigarettes to the frontline soldiers. We could have planned and executed busing plans, including the one in Denver, that would have operated much better so people wouldn't have been initially put off by the poor logistics of how it worked. There were many people calling my mother. There were people calling my mother from all over the city who were teachers, complaining about how the busing plan itself, had been sabotaged by the school administration. So the solution may have had it.
Right, by putting the kids in very circuitous routes and taking longer and so on and so on. Joel, I hear your voice in the background there. Are you back with us?
I was just listening to the tail end of what Buddy said, and why it was sabotaged is the busing is because it collided with a lot of other values, including that of the neighborhood schools. And so that those people with resources, both white and otherwise, that could opt out of it, either chose parochial schools, sent their kids to the suburban schools that were not part of the Denver public schools, and sabotaged it actually in very many ways, one of which was the amount of students and resources that were available to the public schools.
Well, that's hardly what I was talking about. In fact, that was not what I was talking about. What I was talking about was the actual the actions of the administration itself, not the parents who made choices. There were available choices and options for them to make. I'm talking about sabotage by the way it was executed by the administration. If you set up a bus route that takes a kid from Quebec and 32nd and put him in a school in Southwest Denver, where he has a 45-minute bus ride, and the kids that end up on the bus are picked up at 10 or 12 different spots, so they all don't know each other and arrive tired, that's intentional, and that's sabotaging the plan. I'm not talking about the rights of other parents to have opted to go to parochial schools. theirs to exercise, and I'm saddened that if they did that to avoid being in school with Black children, I'm saddened that they did that. I'm saddened that their beliefs are in opposite to mine. But that's not what I was talking about.
Well, I think that the administrators, from what I read in the book, I think we're probably opposed, not for good reason, but so that therefore the whole situation was burdensome, and that the busing was a burdensome solution that really didn't please anybody, including the students that had to ride the buses.
All right, let's just talk about the students that remained in the system whose parents did not opt out. So for those students, if the bus schedule had worked in a cooperative way, then they need not have been upset. And I'll give you an example. I was bused in 6th grade. I went from kindergarten to 5th grade at Wyman. I was bused in 6th grade because the school board created an optional district, primarily for white children, to not have to go to Columbine. This optional district was following the pattern of Blacks moving east into neighborhoods that had previously been segregated. And at the point that the board approved this plan, which was one of the cornerstones of the Keys case, whites had not moved out from Steele to Colorado Boulevard, 26th Avenue to 32nd. That was almost all white. And the school board gave children in just this optional district the opportunity not to go to Columbine, which was almost all Black, but to go to Park Hill, which was probably the top school in the city. My father had built a house 1 block into this optional district on 26 and Adams. The man sold his lot to Elvin Caldwell, who was a Black city councilman who looked white, didn't know he was.
I remember him.
And my father, Mr. Caldwell, sold it to my father the next day. We built a house on it in 1958. And that fall, my parents elected for me to go to Park Hill instead of Columbine. And I was the only Black kid on this bus going to Park Hill. Mm-hmm. Now that's just using the bus so that white children don't have to go to a Black school, and they'll be glad to be bused to Park Hill. And that busing schedule was set up so that it worked so well. We would get to school early enough at the same time the kids were arriving from the neighborhood to go to school. Some of the friends I made in that year, Bob Bears, Dave Babs, I played with them before school. The bus left late enough after school that I could get in trouble with them after school and still get on the bus. Now, that's just setting up a busing logistical plan that allows the kids to be kids and the bus to just be a form of transportation. 4 years later, my sister's on the bus. By this time, whites have moved out of this optional district and it's almost all Black, and the bus is almost all Black. The bus arrives at school with my sister, arrives almost before the day is supposed to start. The children are taken directly from the bus into the auditorium and the door is shut, and they don't leave the auditorium until the bell rings. At the end of the day, they go from their class to the auditorium to wait for the bus. They go directly from the auditorium into the bus. They have no interaction with children before or after, other children before or after school. Now that's intentional sabotaging the bus schedule so that children don't even do what they might ordinarily have done, simply met each other, liked each other, and played, let alone hopefully learned how to be better people through a better education opportunity at what became, at the time and later, the top elementary school. My teacher for 6th grade, Elsie Glessner, who was dead by the time they created the Colorado Teacher of the Year Award. She was the first one selected to be the Colorado Teacher of the Year. And that was my sixth grade teacher. That's how different my experience was at Wyman to what it was at Park Hill. As I said, was the cornerstone of Judge Doyle's decision in the Keyes case. Judge Doyle determined that there was de facto segregation. He also determined that there was de jure segregation. He determined that the scenario that I explained was purposeful, intentional discrimination by the school board, taking advantage of moving patterns, residential moving patterns to gerrymander school districts around those for racial purposes. That was spelled out in the decision. The de facto part that he dealt with in his opinion, that became also a key part of the appeal up to the Supreme Court. That's why the Keyes case was one of the first, maybe the first, I think, city outside of the South where the court actually found de facto segregation and upheld a busing order to attempt to solve it. But what I spelled out is in the case.
Right. No, but again, what the dialogue we're having is so profoundly important because, as we can tell, we're in different bubbles. The country and so many different segments of the country just are experiencing things so much differently.
I agree. We are in different bubbles. We were in different bubbles at East High School. You said there were two, and I'd say there were probably three. There are white folks that don't want to be with black folks. There's some black folks who just, even if they wanted to, don't have an opportunity to be with white folks. They're in such a segregated situation, even if they wanted to, they're being prevented from that kind of intercourse, that kind of interaction to their detriment, naturally. And then there's a group in the middle that maybe is a larger group of those of us who are black and white and who interact. And maybe that's where the bubble that they're in is getting larger. I hope that bubble gets large enough to really affect the other two. But the bubble we're seeing that's getting a lot of the press attention, a lot of the country's attention, is the whites who only want to be with whites. I mean, they were obviously up at the insurrection at the Capitol. They are at the forefront of the white supremacy surge that we've seen since President Obama became president. But the part in the middle of people who are not just willing, but intentionally intending to forge a country where there's interaction between the races that allows for the promise of America to be fulfilled at increasing levels, hopefully. That's how I see it.
No, absolutely. You know, another irony, I did a show last week, Buddy, and both Joel too, if you're listening, that dealt with slavery in the North, in East Hampton, particularly, where I have a place, in Long Island. It's absolutely astounding the denial of that reality in those exclusive areas, and it's something very, very needed, and we need to begin to discuss that. It's not just a Southern issue. The wealthiest individuals and families in East Hampton, Southampton, all along the East End there, made their fortunes largely through sugar, through whaling industries, and so on, and basically because of slavery. And there was something like 25 slaves, I think it was 1640 in East Hampton, out of a population of 500. Complete denial. There were more Black people walking around East Hampton at that time, or in the 60s, 80s, and 60s, and 70s, than there is today. So, listen, Buddy, we have totally agreed. How we define the problem comes to then play an enormous part in these solutions. how do we bring about a transformative America where it truly lives up to what it says it's all about? What are some of the solutions that we might explore?
Well, so I may be 74 now, but it doesn't mean that I got that much wiser. And so I'm not the repository of the solution search. I wish I was. I wish I had studied it more and did have a kind of an expert opinion to offer. But aside from that, what I have learned, or what I think I've learned, is that Black people have done over time from 1619, we have done our fair share of helping to define how we've been victimized and hurt. And that attempt to create a realization of a problem hasn't turned out to be enough for the problem to be recognized, let alone the solutions to be voiced and best ones selected time after time. We spend more time and effort trying to convince the general public that there is a problem. And I see that as one of the largest problems. We talking to white people to create that awareness is certainly necessary, but not sufficient. Another step, whether it's sufficient or not, has to be white people, who I call good white people, talking to other white people who I call maybe not so good, to change their minds, to change their beliefs, to stop violating laws, to stop violence. Clearly, Black people articulating their perspective may be necessary, but it's not sufficient. White people talking to each other. It's not an issue of, do I have a right to be a racist, a constitutional right to have racist beliefs? It's people talking to each other and saying, that's not the question. The question is there right or wrong? If it's wrong, don't do it. If it's wrong, figure out how to do something right. And I encourage more white people to discuss these issues with each other and attempt to make the world a better place.
Well, I think that, I don't know if I'm on or not, but if I am,
yes,
that I think that feeling was very much there in Park Hill. I made my mother, when I was 15, take me to hear Martin Luther King speak one Sunday. It was the first time I had ever been in a church as a Jew. But to my 15-year-old mind, that was important. And I saw a church full of people that I thought they agreed that they thought it was important. And the difficulty was that we don't understand, and we didn't understand then how to get from those good feelings to really effective actions that would lead to transformation. And the danger is that those people that were on the sidelines or were just a little bit connected or committed, in the face of adversity or opposition, would drop off. And that's what I think happened with the busing thing. I think that the general feeling of the overwhelming number of people in Park Hill and other places is they wanted to solve the problem, but they didn't like the solution, so they either sabotaged it or did something else. And so the trick, and I don't have the trick, was what could you do to transform the situation without, to be generic, pissing people off? And is that possible?
Well, I think that continues to be the problem. The last 4 years have shown that the people who want to be pissed off can be pissed off pretty significantly. And how do you persuade people to see a different way? Democracy starts with an assumption, it needs to be constantly proven, that more information, more actual factual information will allow people to form better conclusions and establish better beliefs, or establish their own beliefs that are more consistent with values that underlie democracy. So to me, we start with an informational opportunity that we need to create better information, more dialogue. And again, the more perfect world that we'd all like to see may be beyond our lifetime, but it is the increase, the improvement is what I would hope I see, or certainly my children begin to see. I'm heartened by the generation of my children and my grandchildren. I think they're better than the baby boomers. I'm very disappointed in what our generation turned out to be. We started out with a ball of fire, and I think we corrupted our way along. We got corrupted along the way, and we're ending with some pretty sad examples at the top of the heap, who are baby boomers just like us.
We've tried here that, what took over was narcissism.
Well, let me add. This is, gosh, I wish we had more time. This is provocative here, but look, we've tried to do what you've been talking about, buddy. We haven't. We've tried to carry on that tradition in that radical imagination. I love doing this show. I really wanted to have much more of a dialogue and much more of an opportunity for the three of us to really dig down and have a more serious conversation. I really hope we can do this again. I really, really want to very badly, perhaps over the summer. Would you be agreeable to that, buddy?
Sure.
Absolutely. And Joel, I would love that too. And you'll have your opportunity and the time to express yourself more fully, because I know that you've been involved too, Joel, in this struggle. And as a Jew, you understand the nature of that extreme racism as well. So at this point, I just have to tell us all, thank you so very, very much for watching us here on The Radical Imagination. We'll see you again next week on The Radical Imagination. This is Jim Vrettos. Stay well and stay strong.
Back in the day, you know, we were marching with Dr. King, and you know, us youngsters, some of us would take off by ourselves, and we would just march all day and sing. After a while, somebody would say, let's get something to eat. So we would stop, we'd go in this restaurant, and we sit down. We saw the waitress when she went in the back, and then she wouldn't come back out. Took her a long time to come out, but we sit there. When she came out, she said, y'all get out of here. I'm gonna call the police. We just sit there. And when we heard the police coming, we heard the sirens and all, we joined together, made our chain, locked arms, and we began to sing this song. We shall not be moved. We shall not be moved like a tree that's planted by the water. We shall not be moved. We We shall not be just like a tree that's planted by the water. We shall not be moved. We're fighting for our children. We shall not be moved. We're fighting for our children. We shall not be like a tree that's planted by the water. Oh yeah. We shall not be moved. Oh yeah. We shall not be moved. Oh, we shall not be moved. Oh, like a tree planted by the water. We shall not be moved. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Mississippi, goddamn, this is our last tune. We had some request for it. Alabama's got me so upset. Tennessee made me lose my rest. And everybody knows about Mississippi, goddamn. Alabama's got me so upset. Tennessee made me lose my rest. Everybody knows about Mississippi, goddamn. Can't you see it? I know you can feel it. It's all in the air. I can't stand the pressure much longer. Somebody say a prayer. Alabama's got me so upset, and Governor Wallace has made me lose my rest. Everybody knows about Mississippi, goddamn. Hound dogs on my trail, school children sitting in jail. Black cat crossed my path. I think every day's gonna be my last. Lord have mercy on the land of mine. We all gonna get it in due time. I don't belong here, I don't belong there. I've even stopped believing in prayer. Don't tell me, I'll tell you. Me and my people just about do. I've been there, so I know they keep on saying, go slow. That's just the trouble. Too slow. Washing the windows. Too slow. Picking the cotton. Too slow. We're just plain rotten. Too slow. We're too damn lazy. Too slow. Our thinking's crazy. Too slow. Where am I going? What am I doing? I don't know. Just try to do my very best. Stand up, be counted with all the rest. Everybody knows about Mississippi, goddamn. Picket lines, school boycotts. They try to say it's a communist plot. All I want is equality for my sister, my brother, my people, and me. You like lied to me all these years. You told me to wash and clean my ears and talk real fine just like a lady, and you'd stop calling me Sister Sadie. But my country is full of lies. We all gonna die and die like flies. I don't trust nobody anymore. They keep on saying go slow. That's just the trouble. Desegregation, mass participation, unification, do things gradually, will bring more tragedy.